it's almost impossible now to kick off after these 2 inspiring hours, and but I will try to be kind of devil's advocate, and yeah, let's have some fun. Huh? I thought, my God, I have the best introduction, but then you. Yeah, I said I would like to ask you who paid the project, in fact, but yeah, it was there. But it's this ambiguity, this paradox is in both presentations present. I found so it's not only you who are living with an ambiguity or with paradoxes. I also found that. Happening in your talk at a certain time, not that clear, but more subtle, and also questioning this what we could call this new economy, which is there, Kickstarter, all these crowd funding, making, building. Initiatives that are trying to change something, but in fact they are, if I have to be honest, they are not really helping. And I'm cynical now, a little bit cynical, in order to provoke you. They are not really helping. They are helping the neoliberal system to go further, to go on and even go further, and to give arguments even to say that that people can help themselves, that they can do everything themselves, that they can organize the library in the squatted area themselves, and so on, so that it's not needed anymore to do these services. And that there are enough crazy creative people that will take a certain responsibility for a community. And is this not what we are provoking by all these initiatives with the best and good intentions? So this is a quite hard critique, but I'm quite sure you can bring some.
Thank you. I love critiques because it's the only way to have a productive debate. Yes, by the way, I agree with you. I was criticizing the use of these models for everything, by the way, not supporting them for everything. But at least I think that this crisis has made people to start thinking again on new alternatives. Of course, when you think on new alternatives, you have an experimental period. So you don't know if it will be a failure or a success. But also, I think they have a positive fact that they don't follow the individualist approach of the system. At least these new initiatives are based on the collectivity. And even if as an economical new model, they can be a failure, but they are the catalyst for new relationships. And I think this can be very positive, because if something fails, but if you are working together with more people, you can try to envision another ways. Because the traditional system and the capitalist and neoliberal system is based on individuality. And this Bitcoin, Kickstarter, whatever, maybe are not the best ways, but behind the economical model, the good fact I find is that they are reinforcing collectivity again. And this can be good to provoke small changes in the cities or in the system we're living. And I think maybe the richness can be found there and not as an economical model.
Why? Maybe it's also good to elaborate a little bit on this, and then I come to Michiel. Is it not interesting, because I found that you didn't really formulate the alternative, itself. I'm referring now to the peer-to-peer foundation. Michiel Bouwen's, what he is doing. Maybe it's good to elaborate a little bit on that. Is this because he is trying to formulate an alternative model? How that we can deal with, how that we live together, how that we construct a society in another way, how that we construct public space in a new way, just by peer-to-peer and going from capitalism and not seeing only communism as the alternative, but as a commonism, as a kind of new model for a society. Is this, do you believe in that, or is that what you think could be an alternative?
This is a very tricky question because I believe in some parts of the peer-to-peer, but I think that for now, and recalling Michel's words, we are living inside the whale belly. So, of course, the peer-to-peer society is trying to promote new ways also economically to exchange not only ideas and knowledge, but also goods and this new economy. But at the end, we all need to pay the rent at the end of the month, to go to some kind of a store or supermarket to buy our food. So I think that maybe what makes me a little bit skeptic with the peer-to-peer society, it's that they are trying to provoke a big change, a global change with the big network they have. And maybe I believe that this change can only happen at a smaller scale, when you can really exchange or create new projects in a smaller scale, because it's the only way to act aside the system. If not, maybe you create a community of co-housing, for example, so you don't have to pay the rent with the same money as always, and you can work in a different way. But if you try to change this big system from the scratch, I think it's almost impossible because of the scale. So maybe the peer-to-peer foundation can be a good model, but I think they need to start working in a smaller scale and not thinking on this big change, because if not, they are repeating Margaret Thatcher's words: one nation, one people. So, and this is maybe the failure I find, in my opinion.
Okay. We go to the private space, and the private space is an antique squat place. This also is where you live, your house, your apartment?
No, it's just the office or the studio.
Ah, the office, okay. So, but that means...
I couldn't bear looking at all of that all day long, so I'm glad that at the end of the day I can leave that space and then go to my house, okay. And there it's nice and quiet. Yeah.
But that also means something, eh? I mean, that the fact that you can work in that kind of spaces also makes it possible to do what you do, and to do that in that spot. This also shows, again, a kind of ambiguity on possibilities that are there in Amsterdam itself.
Yeah, we're very privileged. I'm the first one to admit that. And we have good connections, so we were asked to move into that building. But then we tried to be generous, so we could also have turned it down, the offer, and say, no, we'd rather find something super expensive in another location. But we embraced the opportunity, and we brought along our friends. So we were allowed to introduce others. So half of the building consists of people that we personally knew before we went there and that we invited. And then we have this semi-public space. It's the former canteen. It's an office building. And we converted that into a gallery space, or this project space. So we do all kinds of cultural events there, film screenings, book readings, etc., etc. And people don't have to pay rent for that. So we just lend it to them. So yes, we are privileged and we are benefiting from this rotten system, but at the same time we're trying to ride the wave and use it. Yeah.
I would like to go slowly more and more to public space itself. What is your definition of public space?
The space we share, maybe.
And yours?
Yes, the space for everybody.
It is, and now I go back a little bit to what we do in Z33, is that we don't call it anymore public space. We don't think there is really public space itself. There is, so sharing or the place for everybody is indeed something, because everything what you do, even what we, even here, this is a museum, but sometimes they rent out, they privatize, they market the space. The market, sometimes I think you can hire parts of the museum square even, you can rent it probably. So all these places are privatized for some moments. The infrastructure that is below is sometimes, or is even in Belgium, some market spaces are built and constructed by banks. They are in concession. They look like perfect public spaces, but you cannot do everything what you want there, because the banks financed the government in order to renovate the public space itself. It's invisible, you cannot see it, but it's from the bank.
Okay, but that's nothing new, eh?
Mm-hmm.
I'm from the cradle of capitalism, from the bedrock of Amsterdam. It's literally built from the wealth generated through the exploitation of others in the 17th century. Large parts of the city are paid for by private wealth back in the 17th century. All the houses, the canals, like also what we would define as public space, squares, everything was paid for by just a small group of people who run the city. The mayor of Amsterdam for a long time was also the richest merchant. So they went hand in hand. There was no such thing as public-private. Everything was private in a way. So I also try to look at our situation from that perspective, from that historical perspective. I mean, I don't want to go back in time in the sense that we should start new colonies, but let's say tourism is also some form of getting your money from abroad. Maybe we can redistribute that wealth that we're generating right now in the same way, because these rich merchants, they built their houses, but they also had peasants coming from the countryside, and they improved their lives by offering them jobs. So there was some sort of solidarity, but still the power was in the hand of a few. But if we can improve that system, maybe there's a way out of it now.
Yes, I think, for example, in Barcelona, yes, the space has famous Barcelona public space has always been private. But what has been changing in the past years is the access to that public space. Because if the government manages it in a good way and allows people to really use it, I think you can still call it public space when you don't have to ask permission to celebrate a kid's party, for example, in a park, because it's spontaneous, it's assumed that you can do that. It can really work. And the government can take money to support and take care of that space. I think there is nothing bad with that if it's well managed, because the public space needs to be taken care, the furniture, the trees, the plants. But what is happening now is that they are closing and privatizing the space, and you need to request permission to do the most small things. So this is not public space anymore. And so the problem is not only who owns the space, but who manage and how they manage the use of that space.
Maybe also to provoke some reaction from the room.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear from some people who are from Ljubljana, because I walked around yesterday, and I'm also interested in soft power that is present in public space. So maybe not CCTV cameras or sponsors like brands that show that we paid for this space, but if I walk around here, everything is so
Clean.
tidy and beautiful, beautiful materials, but it's also pacifying, maybe a bit paralyzing in a way. So maybe there is no brand involved, and maybe everything is taken care of by the local municipality. But I do feel that there is some tension there, that you cannot do everything you imagine in that public space there. So it's not only like a corporate takeover, but it's also like cities who are slowly like, cleaning up public space. And
But can I, before maybe people from Ljubljana react, say something about the introduction movie you showed on Ljubljana?
Yeah.
It was a very interesting project in a park, Tabor Park, I think, done by Prostoroš. They will come later in tomorrow, I think. They are presenting their work, and they are doing these open library books under the trees project, but they are used in the promotion.
yeah.
But your project, also your beautification of Amsterdam, even the last non-used spaces are used by IM Amsterdam, and so there are little initiatives, but they are also in the whale. They are also in the belly of the whale. I would like to know, I think I saw somebody from Prostoroš. No? I thought, no? Damn. Yeah? Ah, yeah, voila, yeah. Damn. How do you feel about that?
I think that our whale is not so smart as Amsterdam is. Maybe it will become once, but now at the moment, there is no such a threat as you presented and in Ljubljana. And I think we are just on the start, and all these examples that we hear are really good to hear, because then we can learn a lot. In which direction should we go? But you know, yeah, they put commercial. That the library is not our project, but it is in the Park Tabor. And Masha, did you add something? Okay. I think we have maybe now better position from what you said, because now we know where we don't want to go, maybe. But yeah, there is not such a threat in Ljubljana, I guess, that we don't have any. There are a lot. Would you add something? Yeah. Huh? No, because it's also the public space. I think it has to be maintained, and who will maintain it? And if you just say we don't want the city maintains it, then who will do it? And this is, I think maybe I will explain more in the lecture, but this is the question: where are we? Who will now? And I think in the small scale is the solution. Yeah, not in the big, as you said. So, but,
yeah. I was in Vienna a few days ago talking about also money, and it came into the discussion a quote that I think it's very appropriate, that the oldest crowdfunding system in Europe is taxes. So somebody has to maintain things because we are part of the system, but maybe the problem of what we have to fight when the system starts working bad is for the, as I said before, for the good management of these resources, not if they exist or not exist, but to use it in a way that they return to the citizens. So maybe it somehow links with what you were saying.
I would like to come, I have some other questions about you, about design as a critical tool, but first we go back to the cities, and you were asking at a certain time, what could Amsterdam learn from Barcelona? And I have the same question then reverse, of course. What could Barcelona learn from Amsterdam? Your first reaction?
Don't organize the Olympics.
I think in Barcelona the most notorious influence from Amsterdam is in the artistic and activist field, and how the people start trying to, let's say, hack the government by showing them that they need to support in the same way as in Amsterdam they support new initiatives, and it's the biggest influence I have seen.
What can we learn from Barcelona, right?
Yeah, what can we learn? Don't organize. Yeah, clear. Design as a critical tool, or at least technology. There was at a certain time in your presentation you were referring to technology as the answer, but what was the question? You see all kind of disruptive technology who is jumping up and getting out. We can break together here the taxi system and the taxi company by Uber. If we download the app, we can hit and I use these words, and kick the hotel system that is there down by setting up and organizing together Airbnb. So these kind of disruptive technologies are really liked, and I also explicitly use the word liked a lot, not only by us, and creating a certain alternative economy and make private space public space, or at least gives it the idea of, but it also knocks down all kind of good things. I mean, a hotel where people can work for a certain wage with rules, with legislation, with a permission and so on is maybe not bad at all. And hygiene and other things. And the same thing for the taxi driver. You want that it's organized properly and that you know what you can pay and so on. So what about that?
Yes, by the way, I think I have my iPhone and lots of apps there. I put these examples because I think to create a debate or to transmit a message, you have to be very provocative. If not, it stays like very soft. But of course, there are good things. For example, in Barcelona, I use the app for the bicycle transportation system to know where is an available bike and an available space to park the bike, these kinds. And this improves the quality of the life in the city. But what I was criticizing is that in times of crisis, maybe we look for some shelter in new technologies because we have the access to that, and you don't even know what for. So I was criticizing the excess or the blind faith in technology. If there are some other things that need to be set up or think before and then develop in a technological way. Maybe that's what I was trying to say. So I was very critical because of that, because if we start with the technology but doesn't have a project behind, what for? So maybe this is the alternative. Start in the opposite way.
Yeah, I can add something to it and tell about another project we did, which also relates to public space. Again, being in the belly of the whale, we were asked by the city to make an app, to develop something that would allow them to give local residents the power to decide on their own built environment. So changes to the built environment, that they could raise their voice, that they could make themselves known to the local municipality. So what we did, we created for a very deprived neighborhood in Amsterdam, the Bijlmer is this modernist post-war neighborhood. We made something which is basically an app, which is a mashup of all the social media. So it puts all the social media interaction on a map, allowing people who live in the neighborhood to get in touch with each other and also to raise certain issues about, for example, the lack of green space or, all kinds of things. But it turned out, So we were making something for the people. It turned out that it was actually some sort of monitoring device for the municipality. So this whole technology-driven development is also generating a lot of data. And this data, if it ends up in the wrong hands, then again you have this exploitation. So we are now very cautious about stepping into that, because same with Airbnb, and you just have to wait. Within a few months, they will start charging you. They will start selling their data to other companies, and it will be the end of it.
You both believe in a kind of, still, I find, in a 20th century model, and you were explicitly referring to it in the makeability of society, in that we can shape society, that we can do it. And you also ended with that, literally saying, can we shape the system? Can we do that? I would like to start with Ethel.
Yes, by the way, sometimes people refers to me as a very optimistic person, but I think I don't know if we didn't have the value or the capacity to adapt. We have the human race have been disappeared. It's Darwinian. We have the ability to understand the system and try to adapt and to shape the kind of society we want. With the pass of time, it has become more difficult because the system has grown bigger, and as we have been saying before, we are in the belly of the whale. But still, I think it's again, in my opinion, a question of scale, because if you start working from your street, your neighborhood, it's easier because you can have real communication with the people, not only through the apps, for example, real communication supported by the technology. So you can start from a small scale and then try to, but not trying to shape the whole society from a top-down approach, because this is not possible or not used. I don't believe in that. I believe that we need to reinforce human relationships and the relational city again.
Again, to be kind of skeptical, I see these bottom-up initiatives, or even these 5 tents on the museum square. After a couple of days, months, years, they are gone. They are not there anymore. They are eaten not by the whale anymore, but some other predator. So they are not sustainable.
But there are examples that are based, for example, in these relationships I was telling. I want to describe a very pragmatic example in Spain with the 15M movements. We have more than 2 or 3 months, the Square Occupy, and it was very famous worldwide, and then it started disappearing. But what people or mass media or government haven't seen is that it's not disappear. It just fragmented in a small, and all these people is acting in their neighborhoods. And for example, a big movement like the platform from the affected of the mortgage that even has changed one law is the first time that the main government accept in more than 15 years a proposal of law impulsed by the people. This movement emerged from the 15M, but then started working and focused in just one single project, not trying to change politics, economics, everything at the same time, no. Which is the main problem? Housing, right, for housing. So we are going to, and they have done really, really great work. So this is the kind of change I believe, not trying to change everything or with the big movement, but the relationships, you know, if I was in the square and I know you, or you're a lawyer, you know about housing, you're an architect, so let's do something together. So the relationship can create a new project.
So it's about changing attitudes, changing mentalities, rather than changing infrastructures and complex, yeah. Do you have the same opinion, or?
I'm actually sorry that I introduced this, the metaphor of the whale, because it becomes a thing of its own. But maybe to stick to it for a little bit. What I'm afraid of is what happens when the whale dies, and we're in the stomach, in the belly of that whale, because I am living in the land of milk and honey, but friends of mine who are living in Greece, for example, their Ministry of Culture was just abolished overnight, and which gave them the opportunity, for example, to occupy a theater in the center of the city, and they were super happy because they could not have done that before that. But after a few months, with no money for maintenance, etc., became completely uninhabitable. So I think we should think about resilience and what happens even like in countries like the Netherlands if there's no longer will. If you look at the city is divided into districts, and these like ultra-local governments, they're now also being abolished. So there's no direct link from the neighborhood level to local politics anymore. And so the government is retreating, and what will come in place? And who are we dependent on then? Or maybe on nobody. And then it's just us. And how are we going to deal with that? So while we're in the wheel, I think we should also try to look around what alternatives there are. But it's hard, because we're spoiled also.
Yeah. You? Yeah.
Just no, that I agree that we should talk about resilience, because the cities are like organic, like organisms. So sometimes the mutations go for good, and sometimes just disappear a part of the space of a neighborhood or something. And I think it's part of a natural development or evolution. No?
We started to talk about biology, and we started to talk about resilience, and in fact, money. And there we started. It's about money, efficiency, resilience. I think two keywords that we not exactly were using, but are very necessary in nature. One is connectivity, connect with certain people, and also where you were pointing out is you don't want only an Amsterdam of big institutes with Rijksmuseum, but also small initiatives with people that are doing things. And I think connectivity and diversity creates resilience. And if we also take that in account in building and constructing public space, I think we can do that for the future here also in Ljubljana. I would like to give more the public the floor, or Matthäus. Otherwise, we conclude here.